Bill Maher thought it'd be just another night, another jab at faith, another smirk for applause. But when Karoline Leavitt walked onto that stage, calm and unwavering, everything changed. He mocked her belief in God like it was a punchline. What he didn't expect was her reply. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. She simply spoke, and the entire room fell silent. If you believe in faith, courage, and standing tall when it matters most, subscribe now. Because this is the kind of story they don't want you to hear. But we'll make sure it's told. The studio lights at CBS Television City in Los Angeles hadn't warmed up yet, but Karoline Leavitt felt a chill anyway, not from the temperature, but from something deeper, something that whispered in her ear like an omen. She sat in the quiet dressing room alone, her cross necklace resting gently at her collarbone, fingers brushing the edges as if drawing strength from it. The room was polished, pristine, and impersonal. A place scrubbed so thoroughly by makeup artists and stagehands that it had long forgotten what human presence felt like. But Karoline felt everything. An assistant knocked once, then entered briskly. "Ms. Leavitt, 10 minutes." She nodded, gave a polite smile, and returned to the mirror. But the reflection staring back didn't flinch. Blonde hair tucked neatly, jacket ironed sharp, eyes steeled not with nerves, but with memory. The memory of the phone call from her press advisor 2 days earlier. "Bill Maher wants you on his show." Karoline had raised an eyebrow. "To talk policy?" "They're calling it a conversation on civility," her advisor had said, then lowered her voice. "But if he jabs at your faith, your background, your values, don't let it go unanswered." Karoline remembered sighing, slow and thoughtful. "I don't go looking for fights," she said, "but I don't leave my faith at the door either." Now, standing alone in the dressing room, that vow echoed louder than ever. She wasn't here to be liked. She wasn't here to impress a liberal late-night crowd. She was here to tell the truth. And yet, something about the atmosphere felt colder than usual. The hallway outside was full of laughter, footsteps, clinking glasses. But those sounds died out the moment Karoline stepped into view earlier. Not even a producer offered water. No one introduced her to the other guest. They didn't have to say it. She wasn't welcome, not really. She adjusted her blazer, deep navy, understated, with a pin of the American flag clipped at her chest. She chose it deliberately. This wasn't a costume. This was who she was. A daughter of New Hampshire, a conservative, a woman of faith, and more than anything, someone who would not bow for applause. As she stepped into the hallway, the stage manager gave her a tight nod. "We're live in 2 minutes." Karoline offered a calm smile and walked past the wall of black and white portraits, icons of television, nearly all men, nearly all smug-faced, as if history belonged to them alone. She didn't stop. She just walked right through the air that seemed to thicken with each step. She could already sense it. Bill Maher was going to try to humiliate her, maybe not with shouting, but with sarcasm, with a smirk, with that casual mockery that late-night liberals use to get laughs while pretending it's just a joke. But what they didn't know, what they would soon learn, was that Karoline Leavitt wasn't just another pretty conservative to poke fun at. She had fire beneath her calm, and unlike most of his guests, she didn't need applause to feel strong. The studio lights came up, the theme song played, the moment began, and it would be one America wouldn't forget. If you believe in standing firm, defending your faith, and hearing voices that won't back down, then hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning. The applause sign blinked. The crowd cheered. But Karoline could already feel the tension behind Bill Maher's grin as he leaned in, elbows on the desk like a man who thought he'd already won. His voice was cool, relaxed, even charming. But Karoline knew the tone all too well. It was the setup, the smirk that always came before the sting. "Our next guest is a former White House staffer," Maher began, "a proud conservative, and possibly the last person left under 30 who still thinks God belongs in politics." Laughter erupted. Karoline smiled softly, not out of amusement, out of patience. "Welcome to the show, Karoline. I'm guessing you've brought your faith along for the ride." She folded her hands calmly. "Bill, I bring my values everywhere, including here." Another ripple of laughter. But a few heads turned, watching more closely now. Maher's grin sharpened. "So let's talk about values. You've spoken out against abortion, gender ideology, and drag queen story hours at public libraries. Don't you think it's a bit much? Karoline tilted her head just slightly. You say a bit much. I say it's protecting children. Funny how the same crowd that screams, protect the vulnerable, goes silent when we talk about faith or family. The room shifted. Not everyone was laughing now. Maher tried to pivot. Sure, but isn't forcing your beliefs on others kind of the opposite of freedom? Karoline leaned in. Freedom doesn't mean silencing voices you don't like. It means allowing all voices. Yes, even the ones that wear a cross. Silence fell. It wasn't awkward, it was heavy. Then came the moment that would go viral within the hour. Maher, playing it cool, raised an eyebrow and fired the shot. You know, Karoline, you remind me of the old days, when women were seen, not heard. Only now you're seen, heard, and still think you're being persecuted. Gasps, audible gasps. But Karoline didn't flinch. She turned her gaze straight to him, unblinking. No, Bill, I think I'm being targeted. Not because I'm weak, but because I'm strong in something you can't mock away. The studio froze. My faith isn't a prop, she continued. It's the reason I don't snap back. It's the reason I sit here calm, while you try to make a joke of what I believe in. The air cracked like lightning. And from the back row, someone started to clap. Then another. And another. Until the room, reluctantly, hesitantly, shifted. Karoline didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She simply sat back as if to say, I've said what needed to be said. And Bill Maher, for the first time in the segment, looked like he wasn't quite sure what to say next. Karoline's words didn't just land. They pierced. For a full 2 seconds, which felt like 2 hours, no one moved. Bill Maher blinked, slightly off rhythm now, like a musician who'd lost the beat mid-song. The laughter he relied on didn't come. Even the studio lights seemed harsher now, exposing every flicker of unease on his face. He reached for his water, a stall, a cover, anything to buy time. But Karoline? She just waited, calm, still, unapologetically firm. It was the silence that made it deafening. Not the exchange, but the stillness afterward. Older viewers at home might have leaned forward in their recliners, waiting to see what came next. Younger viewers might have grabbed their phones, sensing something was about to go viral. Maher cleared his throat, trying to regain footing. Okay, let's talk about policy then, if we must. But his voice didn't carry the same authority. Karoline's presence had shifted something. And as the segment wore on, it became clear. Bill Maher had invited a guest. But what he got was a reckoning. The show wrapped, but the moment didn't. It reverberated. Karoline stepped off the stage with the same steady stride she walked on with. The assistant who had barely offered a glance earlier now looked at her like he wasn't sure whether to say well done or good luck out there. She passed the same portraits on the wall, the same smug faces frozen in grayscale, but this time she didn't feel like they were staring her down. They were watching history. Back in her dressing room, she sat down, cross necklace still cool against her collarbone. The lights overhead buzzed faintly. Her phone was already vibrating. Mentions, texts, clips from strangers and friends alike. The top video, a 19-second clip. Karoline. My faith isn't a prop. It's the reason I don't snap back. The caption, the calm that shook the crowd. Another post. Bill Maher thought he was being clever. Karoline brought the storm in stillness. By the time she changed out of her blazer and into her coat, she had 4 missed calls. 1 from her mother, 1 from Senator Blackburn's office, 2 from journalists who never usually called her directly. She answered the call from her mom first. You didn't raise your voice, her mom whispered, but you raised the bar. Karoline didn't say much, just closed her eyes and breathed in the silence her words had made. Not the silence of surrender, the silence of stunned respect. The next morning, the headlines began to roll in like a tide. Leavitt silences Maher with 1 sentence. Faith, fire, and a cross. Karoline Leavitt's defining TV moment. Not everyone praised her. Of course not. Some called it melodrama. Others said she was playing the persecution card. But most saw it for what it was, a woman of conviction refusing to be a punchline. Fox News replayed the moment 3 times in 1 hour. One commentator said, "This isn't about politics, it's about courage." CNN had it too, but their tone was different. Karoline Leavitt leans into religious martyrdom to defend her conservative stances, one anchor scoffed. Still, they were talking, all of them. But Karoline wasn't chasing the moment. She wasn't building a brand. She was defending something sacred, and people felt it. Back in her New Hampshire office days later, Karoline walked past her team, all glued to their screens. "Your inbox is a mess," one aide said. "You've got invitations from 3 universities, 2 churches, and The View." She laughed quietly. "Tell Joy Bahar I said hi." Her senior advisor followed her into her office. The emails from seniors, they're different. Dozens of messages, veterans, widows, people who said they hadn't felt heard in years. Karoline paused, hand on her chair. "Read me one." He opened an email. An older man from Kansas had written, "My wife passed 5 years ago. She was the one who always wore the cross, who kept me grounded. I've stopped going to church, but when you said that line, 'My faith isn't a prop,' I cried, and I prayed again. Thank you." Karoline swallowed hard. That was it. That was why it mattered. Later that evening, she sat at her desk and opened her laptop. The clip played again, not because she liked seeing herself, but because she needed to relive it. The feeling, the courage, the calm. In the quiet, she opened her notes app and typed one sentence. "You don't have to yell to shake the earth." She hit save. Then she looked up. A storm was coming, a storm of critics, headlines, social media fire. But Karoline had already faced it once. And when the next moment came, she'd be ready. Still, steady, faithful. Because when you don't bow, they don't know what to do with you. And when you don't flinch, you become a mirror to their mockery. This wasn't just a media moment. This was the beginning of a movement. A week had passed, and yet the ripple effects hadn't slowed. Karoline Leavitt's line wasn't fading into the noise. It was echoing. Through podcasts, pulpits, PTA meetings, her voice, her restraint, and her faith had started something bigger than a comeback clip. That Sunday, Karoline attended church with her father, a small, wood-framed chapel tucked in the snowy edges of Grafton County. She hadn't been home in months, but after everything, it felt right to go back. The pews were full, mostly older folks, farmers, veterans, widows, the kinds of people who still read the local paper and taped verses on their refrigerators. When the pastor mentioned her name during the sermon, said, "Sometimes the Lord sends quiet thunder," Karoline's father squeezed her hand. Later, out in the church parking lot, an elderly woman approached her. Her voice was soft, raspy from years of tobacco and heartbreak. "I buried my husband last fall," she said, "and I've been angry with God since. But you reminded me not to give up on him, or myself." Karoline hugged her. No words, just held her. Because sometimes, power doesn't come from fighting. It comes from not backing down when your spirit is under fire. Back in D.C., the story hadn't cooled. A Capitol Hill reporter caught her outside a veterans' bill signing. "Congresswoman Leavitt, do you think your faith has become your political shield?" She paused. "My faith isn't my shield," she said. "It's my anchor." He scribbled it down. She knew it had become another headline, but she didn't care, because it was true, and truth doesn't flinch. Behind closed doors, the story was shifting the halls of Congress, quietly but undeniably. A moderate senator pulled her aside in the elevator. "You don't have to agree with someone's politics," he said, "to respect the way they carry themselves under pressure." Karoline just nodded. She wasn't playing for applause. She was here to last. A few days later, she received a handwritten letter in the mail. The envelope was thick, the handwriting old-fashioned. It read, "When you stood up for your faith without yelling, you reminded me of my daughter. She died in Iraq. She wore a cross too. Said it helped her stay steady in the chaos. Watching you, I felt like I saw a piece of her again. Keep going. Don't let them harden you. The country needs stillness again." Karoline folded the letter slowly, and for a long moment she wept. That night, she took off her heels, wrapped herself in a blanket, and sat by the window. The city buzzed below, but in that moment, she wasn't thinking about polling numbers or political capital. She was thinking about legacy. What happens when a woman doesn't cave? What shifts when someone walks into the lion's den and doesn't roar, but stands? Older Americans knew. They'd lived it. Through war, economic collapse, moral chaos, and shifting values, they'd seen courage take many forms. And they saw something familiar in her. Not arrogance, not defiance, conviction. Karoline opened her journal, the one her grandmother had given her. She wrote, "Let them call it drama. I call it testimony." Then she added one more line. "Stillness is not weakness. It's where God does his loudest work." Karoline's appearance on Maher's show wasn't just a TV segment. It was a crossroads, a cultural reckoning. In a world trained to shout, she chose silence with purpose. In a moment built for spectacle, she brought grace. And in a time when faith is mocked, she wore hers in plain sight. For seniors watching from small towns and church pews, she became a symbol of dignity, of resolve, of what happens when you don't shrink to make others comfortable. Her words stitched into coffee mugs, sermon illustrations, podcasts, and yes, memes. But beyond all that, they did something deeper. They gave permission. To every woman who's been laughed at for standing firm, to every senior who's been told their faith is outdated, to every American who's been silenced in the name of civility. Karoline didn't just win a moment, she started a movement. So if you're watching this, and you've ever felt small, remember her words. My faith isn't a prop. It's why I don't snap back. Subscribe to this channel if you believe the quietest voice in the room can still speak the loudest truth. We'll keep telling stories that prove it, and we're just getting started.